All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. Happy Wednesday to you. If you're streaming live with us, appreciate you being here. And for those of you that aren't live streaming, we'd love to have you come be part of the show. Just keep up to date with our live stream schedule on Instagram at Bokeh Podcast, B-O-K-E-H Podcast. And you can take advantage of the opportunity to engage with our guests, ask them questions live while we're actually having the conversation. And I think that's one of the benefits of this show and the live stream in particular. So make sure to take advantage of that. And then for the rest of you, well, just for everybody, actually, I really appreciate you taking the time to leave feedback, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review if you think of it. Would love to know your thoughts about the show, what you'd like to see more or less of. Would love to get that kind of feedback on an ongoing basis and look forward to your thoughts there. On that note, I want to go ahead and introduce a brand new guest is here on the show with me today, Carol Arscott. Thank you, Carol, for coming to do the Bokeh Podcast with me.
Nathan, thank you so much for having me. I just love your show. Some people are binge watching Netflix. I'm binge watching your podcast. You just have such great topics and information, and you really dive in and get some in-depth information. So I just can't believe I'm on it. So I'm very excited.
It's totally our privilege, and I appreciate the kind words as well. And you talk about the in-depth. We have relatively limited time, about an hour show, 45 minutes to an hour show. Mm-hmm. And so we can only go so far in depth in those, but I'm not a surface level conversation kind of guy. That's not what I tend to lean toward. I'd like to dig in a little bit. And so I appreciate you noticing that and for the kind words in that. And one of the things I just really love about having you on this show actually is that we're digging into a topic we haven't really touched on much in 600 plus episodes. We're going to actually be talking about dog portrait photography today and kind of your approach to that particular craft. And before we do that, I'd love for you, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself briefly to our audience, just so they get to know a little bit about you and your brand.
Absolutely. My name's Carol Arscott. I'm a pet photographer, and I create custom artwork for pets and their people. One-of-a-kind pieces that they'll be able to enjoy in their homes every day. So, I encourage people to get their artwork printed, whether it's wall art or albums, so that they can enjoy it every day instead of just having it on their computer. And then I also, a big part of what I do is centered around rescue. Rescue is the cornerstone of my business, and I like to think of it as helping dogs to help dogs. So I incorporate rescue into pretty much everything I do, and through that I'm able to raise a lot of money for a lot of rescues.
Brilliant. And I love that you have, for anybody who wasn't live streaming, we see an extra guest in the background making their way around.
That was Moby.
Moby, beautiful Moby.
I told you he'd make an appearance.
And what did you say? He's a Saint Bernard and...
Yes, he's a Saint Berdoodle, Saint Bernard and Poodle mix.
And Poodle mix. That's such a wild combo. I love it.
Yes,
okay.
He's a rescue. And I'm sure he will come back over.
Yeah, the guest appearance, we'll look forward to that. But what I want to do here, just for anybody listening in, if you're not familiar with Carol's work, and I popped up her website on the screen here, but we'll go ahead and do this here. I want to actually, there we go, bring up the website, Carol Arscott, CarolArscott.com. And check out Carol's work. Carol, your work truly is beautiful, and it's not very often that I have the opportunity to kind of dig into the pet photography or dog photography world. And see this level of work as well. It's truly beautiful, and I love that we have somebody on the show that can not just speak theoretically, but from actual present or actual experience. Certainly, actual time photographing dogs, but then also the work to back it up. So I got to give you props for that.
And here's Moby. Hi, sweetheart.
His head is even bigger than yours. That is a really big dog for sure.
He's giant. Yeah, he's about as tall as I am when he stands on his hind legs.
So is Moby a rescue as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell us a little backstory.
So he was an owner rehome situation. He showed up on Facebook. It was a situation where they needed him out of the house that night. They were moving and they were in a desperate situation. He was in Baltimore. I jumped in the car and drove down and grabbed him. I had no idea how big he was. He was only 6 months old at the time, and he was still huge. But he came home, and it's been a happily ever after.
That's really, really cool. I know we didn't kind of plan on talking about this, but I think it's important. It's obviously very much related to the conversation at hand. You talked about a lot of the motivation behind you being a pet photographer has to do with taking care of these pets who don't have homes. Where does that passion come from? What's the backstory to that?
I've been involved in rescue for over 8 years as a volunteer pet photographer, and just seeing the stories and the dogs that come through rescue that just don't have anyone. They have nothing in the world. Sometimes they've been abused, they've been abandoned. And I was trying to figure out how can I help. I love photography. I love dogs, so it just seemed like a natural progression to use my photography to help the dogs find their homes. And I started working with one rescue. Then other rescues found out about me, and they wanted help with their photos, and it just sort of grew from there. Now I'm at the point where I work with probably over a dozen rescues, so it's not possible for me to get out and photograph every dog that's coming in. So now they reach out to me when they have a dog that's particularly difficult to place, if they've been in rescue for a long time or they have some other issues that make them tough to adopt. So I have turned my focus to fundraising now, because these rescues do such incredible work, but it's expensive. They have huge medical bills in just feeding the dogs and housing the dogs, and the different programs. And a lot of rescues will train the dogs. So it takes a lot of money, and so I do what I can to help them out with that.
That's really cool. Well, we're going to come back to dog photography here in just a second. I do appreciate you kind of giving an introduction to myself and our audience as well. We're all kind of getting to know you collectively. But there are a couple of introductory questions that I've been asking our guests as of late. First of all, the podcast, the Bokeh Podcast, is really primarily focused on helping photographers build sustainable businesses. And there's a lot of moving parts associated with that idea. But when I think about sustainability, what I think about is a business that doesn't burn us out, which means that we can't effectively be working all the time, right? If nothing else, we're going to at least, our creativity levels will probably drop off, but we'll also get super tired. The motivation kind of dies a little bit at the very least. And that really doesn't enable us then to build a business and sustain a business over a long period of time. So the question that I have for you is, in what way, is there a particular way, a principal idea that you applied to your business that has enabled you to kind of maintain a balance that works for you between work and life, to create a bit more flexibility and freedom for yourself as a business owner?
Well, theoretically, I still put a lot of hours in because I just love it. It is my passion. But that being said, I am concerned that at some point I'll burn out, and I certainly don't want that to happen. There are a couple of things. So automation is key, and that is something I'm working on now. Anything that is routine or, a task that doesn't require a lot of personal touch that can be automated. So that might be automated emails that go out. If someone reaches out to me, I usually give them a personal response. But if I can set up emails for the things that are very routine, like how to access your photos and download them from your gallery, scheduling emails, that sort of thing. Those need to be automated. Also, just people booking calls with me, scheduling themselves for sessions, anything like that I can turn over, using my CRM and setting up workflows and things like that.
What type? Do you mind sharing the CRM that you're using?
Well, I'm currently learning Dubsado.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and those tools, I mean, pretty much all of them, as far as I understand, the tools out there are quite involved. So there's a learning curve involved. Mm-hmm. The big payoff comes on the other side of some of that work, which is exactly what you're talking about. You're able to automate so much of your business. And I think it's certainly more mainstream now, but for the longest time anyway, photographers just didn't take advantage of those tools. I even think about a tool that I use on a regular basis called Calendly. It's what we use to set up our interview initially. Mm-hmm. And the amount of time I've saved just not having to go back and forth an email with somebody saying, does this time work for you? Does this date work for you? And they say, no, that doesn't. Yes. Okay, so does this work for you? No, that doesn't work. I can just literally send them a link to my calendar and they pick a date and time that works. Now, again, this is a bit more commonplace now. I think photographers are more proactive in using these types of tools, but I think it's a good reminder, both for established photographers as well as new photographers, that there are tools out there that will enable you to be able to automate parts of your business and help you save that much more time.
Yeah, I'm not a volume photographer. I mostly work with private clients, but at the holidays, I do, the Santa sessions and the Easter Bunny sessions, just because they're so fun and people love them. And it's a good way to raise money for rescue very quickly because my sessions typically sell out. I just started using a volume photography platform that allows me to photograph a QR code before each dog, and then when I edit the photos, I upload it, and the system automatically sorts it based on the QR code.
Yes.
It automatically emails each person and says, here's your gallery, it's ready, and they can go in on their own and purchase prints or digitals or ornaments or whatever other things that they would like from their gallery. So I used to do all that by hand, and it would take me days.
Now, is that on Dubsado as well, or is that a different system?
No, that is a different system. And I'm just blanking on the name of it right now. I'm so sorry. No. But I can get back to you on that.
Please.
And I'm also using GoGo Photo for a calendar contest. Instead of having to tally votes, because some rescues out there are still tallying votes by hand on their contests, and that's so hard to keep up with. Now people can go in, they can submit their credit card information to vote, cast their votes for the dogs. It shows you a real-time leaderboard, so everyone knows where their dog stands. Cool. It's fantastic. So there's so many tools available. There
really are, and I've said to photographers multiple times over on this show even that if you do a Google search, I mean, you could literally list out what you do in a day on average as a business owner or just in your personal life as well. You literally do a Google search for every single item on that list, and you're likely going to find one of two things. A piece of software that you can use that will help you at least automate or streamline that particular workflow, and or a service, somebody that you can compensate in some way to come in and take care of that particular task or set of tasks for you. It's a brilliant time that we live in. And even myself, like I still have yet to become the guy who takes advantage of the grocery shopping services and apps. Like I still haven't done that yet. I think there's a part of me that's, well, it's part of me that's kind of held on to it. I think just because it gives me a break from my normal existence in my so-called office space, which is really my house. It's nice just to be able to get out and do something different, but it really can save a significant amount of time. And that's just one small example of in 2023, how we're able to leverage services and or tools to be able to save ourselves time. So I love that you highlight that. If you do think about that other service that you're using for the sake of kind of batch processing, post-production after the shoot, I think our listeners would definitely benefit a lot from something. I totally
like that. Zoned out. I don't know why I can't remember.
No worries
that.
at all.
I apologize. But and then the other thing that you sort of touched on, in addition to automation, outsourcing. So I'm sure you can speak to the outsourcing, the editing. That is something that so many photographers have a tough time giving up, myself included, because giving up that control for your images, I mean, that's your product, that's your brand. But to be able to find someone that you can trust, like Photographers Edit, to just turn over those images and get the quick turnaround, and that way you can service more customers and spend the time doing what you love. I mean, I would much rather be out playing with dogs than be behind my computer. So, I just love that you provide that for people. There are anything that is time consuming or something that has a steep learning curve, like I'm having Jeff Brown and his team build a new website for me. Sure, I could research it myself and I could probably put something together, but it would take me forever. It wouldn't look good. I'm not a graphic designer. So finding people that have those skills for things that you either don't like to do or you don't know how to do is a game changer.
And shout out to Jeff too. He was on our show not too long ago, but it's great to be able to have people that you can rely on who specialize in those various areas. I think there's an interesting balance as an entrepreneur, especially as a solopreneur or a sole proprietor, where you've got to know at least enough to be able to have the conversations with those companies or services that you're delegating that work to. If I don't know what I'm asking for, then how do I ask for it, right? And so a certain level of knowledge enables that. But then at some point, there's diminishing returns in that I spend too much time trying to learn that particular thing when I really could just hand it over to somebody else. And honestly, this is still a learning curve for me with my team. I have an amazing team that I get the opportunity to work with. And I still have a tendency in many cases just to kind of go to the thing myself rather than handing that off to whoever it is on the team, whoever specializes in that particular area or spending their time there, and just giving that to them and focusing on what I need to be focusing on. I still need to actively work on it, despite the fact that I own Photographers Edit. And thanks for the shout out, by the way. I appreciate that.
Your service is amazing.
Well, thank you. And it's a good reminder for all of us, myself included. So I appreciate you sharing that. By the way, we've got a few people streaming, and Sue says, hello from Sun Valley, dog photographer here. Thanks, Sue, for chiming in, listening in. And for the rest of you that are online, don't hesitate to say hello as we're getting into this conversation. I do want to ask one other quick question, and then we'll kind of get into your approach to dog photography. Along with sustainability comes the importance of knowing what actually matters? And that's a very broad conversation. But when it comes to our business, I guess more specifically, what is going to be the biggest lever? What is a principle or set of principles that's going to do the heaviest lifting for me? I could, for example, spend hours and hours and hours reading 100 books a year. People are like, I read 100 books this year, 200 books this year, and consuming all the information. But at the end of the day, the reality is that 80-20 principle, right? That 20% of the principles do 80% of the lifting for us. And that's part of what enables us to run a more efficient business, is focusing on the big ideas or principles that make the biggest impact. So that was a long way for me to get to this question, which is there a principle or an idea that you've applied in your business that has done that so-called heavy lifting that's made a big impact in the growth of your business over the years?
So there are a couple things. So when I was starting out, definitely education and coaching. There are a million YouTube videos you can watch to learn just about anything you want to learn, but that takes time. Why spend all that time when I can go to somebody who's already doing it, who can show me the quickest path to get to where I want to be? So I've worked with some tremendous coaches and mentors, and I'm actually starting to coach myself. So I do mentor other pet photographers, people who are just getting into pet photography, or people who are photographing other genres and want to start adding pet photography to their offerings. It's a very different skill set. People who are not photographers think, if you're a photographer, you can photograph anything, but you don't want me photographing your wedding unless it's a dog wedding, and you probably don't want your wedding photographer photographing your dog, because it is a really different set of skills. So that's something that I want to help other photographers with now, to give them the advantage of the things that I've learned over the years. And the second thing is just partnering with people that really can help you with your broader mission. So my mission is rescue, obviously. I've partnered with just tremendous rescues, and I'm getting exposure to people that might not have heard about me otherwise. And I'm making connections, with more and more rescues. I started out with 1 or 2, and now I work with over a dozen. So the connections I made have been invaluable. That has brought people to me. I do projects for rescues to help them raise money, which also brings clients into my business. So it's really, you put good out into the world, and it flows back to you. So really just finding partnerships. I work with other small businesses in the area, other pet related businesses, and we just really help each other, and try to help each other grow. And that's really been key for me.
And I like that you specify the significance of the mission. We talk a lot about brand position here on the podcast. The brand position is kind of the outward-facing statement about what makes this business unique in the process of adding value to that potential customer's life. The mission statement is really for the internal team, whether that's one person or a small team of people or a big team of people. The mission is kind of the underlying why. Why am I even doing this in the first place? And when we have that why, we talked about sustainability earlier. That's part of what enables sustainability of a business over time, is a mission that's bigger than ourselves, that ideally, as you point out, we can collaborate with others on in order to work toward achieving. That will enable us to build a sustainable business over time. And it enables us, when we're maybe not feeling like pushing a shutter button on a camera or getting behind a computer, we know on a bigger picture level what it is that we're working toward. And that is the thing that gets us out of bed and drives us when we don't always feel like doing the work associated with it. So exactly. I love that you highlight that.
Yeah, as photographers, we're pretty siloed, right? I mean, we go out and we work with our clients, but then we come home and we're by ourselves. We're editing, we're doing our marketing, we're doing our PR, we're doing everything ourselves. If you're a small business, and you tend to kind of get in your own little world. So to have other people that rely on you, but also encourage you and inspire you, it really makes a difference. And just having that community and.
That's good. Well, I want to jump into kind of the technique, the approach. When any of our listeners go to your site, and for anybody listening who missed this earlier, if you just go to Carol Arscott, so CarolArscott.com, we'll link to it, of course, in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Make sure to go take a look at Carol's work, because you're going to be quite amazed. And to kind of go along then with that visual experience for our listeners, I'd love to dig into your approach. And Fortunately, ahead of our conversation, you actually made it really easy for me by sending me some kind of big ideas, 6 big ideas behind what enables you to capture photographs, portraits of these dogs the way that you do. And the first thing that you mentioned is not so dissimilar from what we need to do with human clients as well, right? Which is helping them feel comfortable. I'm curious if you just kind of dig into this a little bit. What does it mean to help a dog feel comfortable? What does that look like tangibly, I guess, in front of you? Like, how do you know when you've done that? And then what are a few steps that you take toward helping them feel comfortable?
Sure. So the 2 big priorities for me is, first of all, safety of the animal and their comfort level. So, when we're out somewhere in a park, or sometimes I do shoots in the city, you have to make sure that the dog is on leash and that they're not going to run off. They're not going to see wildlife or another dog or a person and, go running after that. This is something that I forget that people don't understand, because it's just part of my workflow. It's what I do. But people look at my website and they say, I would love to have a session, but my dog can't do that. My dog can't be off leash. My dog is not trained. And I say 95%. Probably more than that. 99% of the dogs I photograph are on leash. I just Photoshop it out. It's, so sometimes the person is standing right next to the dog and, whoop, whoosh, I just take them out in Photoshop.
Magic. Yeah.
So that's the most important part. And, obviously we want the person to feel comfortable too, because people say, oh, I'm really not sure about this. I'm afraid to have my dog off leash. And I said, no, your dog will be fine. They'll be safe. I also have long training leads that I bring with me so that, they can get some distance from their dog if they're comfortable doing that. But the other thing is letting the dog get acclimated to their environment. So oftentimes it will be a place they've never been before, lots of new sounds and sights and smells. So just giving them that time to kind of sniff around. I don't usually start the session as soon as I get there. I take 10 minutes, however long it takes for the dog to get comfortable with me, to get comfortable with the surroundings. Some dogs come right up to me and give me a hug, as soon as they see me. Other dogs take a few minutes to warm up. So... Mm-hmm. But, just want them to... I want it to be fun for them. I want it to be like a play date for them.
Yeah,
so it shouldn't be anything stressful. It's playtime.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm making comparisons here for anybody listening who's maybe not a dedicated pet photographer or dog photographer. I think about the environment that we need to create for baby photography or kid photography, family photography, where you're dealing with kids who, much like the dogs, are like naturally want to run around and explore, and they're excited about a new environment, or maybe they're unsure about a new environment. And a lot of that really does come down to a couple of things, which is one, making sure that the parents are feeling comfortable with this idea, because they think that their kid, in the case of family photography, has to perform perfectly, have to be a particular way.
Yes.
So they're all on edge because of that. And I can imagine maybe like a similar experience for these dog owners that they're like, oh shoot, like I see this picture on Carol's site and my dog's not doing that right now. He's running around freaking out. So I bet a lot of it is easing the owner's sense of discomfort or concern, fear in that particular situation, which kind of leads me to the second point that you made in the email that you shared with me. It was the importance of that, right? If we're trying to create an environment of calm, part of that is for the dog, but the part of that is also calming the owner down a bit.
I would say it's actually more for the owner than for the dog, believe it or not, because dogs feed off what we do, what we put out there, right? If we're happy, they're happy. If we're sad, they can tell. If we're anxious, they pick up on that. So, I always tell people, just relax, let me do the work, don't worry about it. I think that a lot of people worry that they're wasting my time if their dog is not, just like falling into line right away. And I tell them not to expect the dog to do that. Just let them be a dog. This is what I do for a living. I know how to handle their behavior. I can adapt myself to work with them and whatever they want to do at the time. Some dogs do want to just sit there and sit pretty and do their thing. Some are crazy and they're running around in circles and, treating their person like a maypole and wrapping them up in their leash.
Right.
But it's not a problem. It will happen. some owners get a little frustrated, and I said, just the most important thing is to have fun. Don't worry about it. What's the worst that can happen? We come away without any pictures. Nobody's going to get hurt. Nobody's going to, it's, but that has never happened. I have never met a dog I couldn't photograph. And it's really funny because I've had so many sessions where the dogs were a little exuberant, let's say, and at the end of the session the owner says, oh boy, I really hope you got at least one good picture. And then when I do their photo reveal, they're shocked. They said, where did these pictures come from? They said, I was there. It was chaotic. It was crazy. Yeah. And they don't think that we're going to get any images. And then they see them in their slideshow, and they're dumbfounded that that those images came out of the chaotic session.
Is there something that you're saying specifically to the owner that works kind of across the board for most individuals, or is it really person to person, the words or the sentences that you're saying to these people to help kind of ease their concern? Are you using the back of your camera and saying, hey, look, it actually is really beautiful. Just relax. All is good. I got you. Like, what does that conversation sound like? Maybe in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so if they're really anxious and I can tell that they're feeling a little uncomfortable with the session and thinking that we're not getting photos, I will share some from the back of the camera. I try not to do that though, because I like to present it, like I said, as a slideshow, and it's much more impactful that way. But I will share a few images. I let them know there's no time limit, right? I will stay as long as we need to. I only schedule one private client per day so that I'm not rushed. I can stay. It might take 45 minutes. It might take 2 hours, and that's perfectly fine. We let the dog call the shots. If they are getting tired and stressed, then we don't proceed. We take a lot of breaks. We take water breaks, snack breaks, play breaks, whatever that dog needs to feel comfortable. And it always turns out fine. And I think once we get into the session and they see some of the images, then they relax and they're okay with it.
And then when we're talking about creating a calm environment, have you learned over the years a trick that works particularly well for most dogs that does help them, even if they're super exuberant? I love that you use that word, super exuberant, energetic, basically just going crazy. Is there something that you've learned works pretty well to help calm, even for 30, 60 seconds, to calm that dog down just a little bit and just kind of be there for the shoot?
So I always recommend, if they have a particularly active dog, that they try to exercise the dog before the session. So whether that means taking them to the dog park in the morning, taking them on a run, or just taking them out for a longer walk, that really goes a long way to get out some of their energy. Some of my clients like to show up early before the session. They might show up a half an hour early and they'll walk their dog, which gets their energy out, but also lets them get used to the environment. It lets them smell, sniff around. So that's a big help as well. But, there are other things that I do. I have a little necklace with noisemakers on it. And, sometimes you just need to grab that dog's attention for a split second to be able to grab the shot. So I have, duck calls and whistles and all different sounds, squeakers, dog squeaker toy. So.
Love it. I mean, those are really simple, practical ideas. It totally makes sense. The idea of exercising them in advance makes a lot of sense too. Because, I have a cat. My daughter has her cat here from time to time, and he's funny because he will go from being this just literally bouncing off the walls and the windowsills and everything, just going crazy. But then after he has a few minutes to do that, he's literally laying on the floor and his eyes are starting to like slow blink, and you can tell he's really, really chilling it out. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to get him to that place, but he needs the time to let that energy out. And so it makes a lot of sense to encourage that in advance.
Yeah, most dogs, with just a few minutes of activity, that calms them down. And also, people always text me after their session and they said, my dog went to bed at 6 o'clock tonight, or whatever time they got home. The dog is so tired after the session because they are having a lot of fun and they're playing. And when they get home, they just kind of call it a night.
Yeah, well, that's great.
So.
Okay, so at number one, it's important to help the dog feel comfortable, and you talked a little bit about how to do that. 2, establish a calm environment, both for the pet and for the owner. And then 3, you said it's important to understand the personality of the dog. This enables that kind of connection and the ability to be able to capture more impactful portraits. In our culture in the last number of years, we've gotten kind of obsessed with the notion of personality types, right? As human beings, how does this, or does that even translate to the way that you're kind of sizing up a dog and trying to understand the so-called personality of a dog before, or in order to determine how you interact with it? What does that actually look like?
So, I think as pet owners, everyone knows that their pet has their own distinct personality, right? So I have 2 dogs and they're very different. You might see a dog that is shy or reserved and one that's really outgoing and friendly. You might have a super playful dog or one that's more chill. And some of that can be influenced by age. Obviously a puppy is going to be much more energetic and playful and that sort of thing than an older dog that maybe just wants to be calm and sit on the couch with their person. They might be goofy and funny, or they might be a little more serious. Some dogs are serious. They prefer to be with people. They have a more serious look on their face. But so before my sessions, I do a Zoom consultation with the dog and their person. I talk to the owner about what their dog is like, what kind of activities they like to do together, and I encourage them to have the dog on Zoom with them. So the whole time I'm talking to the person, I'm watching their dog. I'm seeing how they interact. I'm getting a sense of what their personality is like at home in their own environment. Then I ask the owner if there's anything they would like me to bring out in the photos. So any particular traits or characteristics or just things that they love about their dog that they would like to see reflected in the photos. And then once we get to the session, I spend the first few minutes interacting with the dog. I kind of sometimes forget the person is there, and I'm down on the ground. I'm playing with the dog, getting to know them. I take their cue. So, like I said, some dogs want to come up to me right away. Some dogs like a little more distance, and I respect that. I just watch them and how they're interacting in that environment, and that helps me get a better sense of who they are and what their personality is like.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I guess it's kind of hard not to relate the similarities of what you're describing to how we might approach a session with a human, individual or a group of people or whatever it might be. The importance of having those conversations to understand the dog in advance, being able to then size them up once you're there in person with them, and then looking for the opportunity to kind of imbue, if you will, that personality in the images. I think a lot of photographers could probably relate to. So it seems very similar. But to that end, and kind of moving on to the next step here, but one of the other things that you mentioned in that email to me was the importance of aiming to kind of capture the dog's soul. And it was interesting the way that you described this, because you said that I guess people are used to engaging with humans this way. Obviously, they're a living, sensing, feeling being. You're saying we should do the same thing when we're photographing pets, more specifically dogs. For somebody who that might kind of seem like a foreign concept to, can you explain a little bit more detail what that actually looks and feels like?
Absolutely. So I was photographed with my dogs about a year ago for a publication, and that photographer was not used to working with dogs, so they mostly spoke with me, and they didn't necessarily have the same kind of relationship or communication with the dogs. I focus on the dogs. I speak to the dogs. It's kind of hard to put this into words, but I grew up as an only child, and I spent a lot of time with my very first rescue dog, Max. We got him when I was 3. And so I didn't have that adult concept of, owning a dog. I had a friend. I had a best friend. And so while the adults were busy doing adult things like feeding him and walking him and taking him to the vet, I was playing hide and seek with him. I was playing house with him. I was reading stories and telling him about Santa and playing vet and, brushing his teeth back at a time when that's not really something people did with their dogs. So I didn't see him as an animal. He was, my companion. Makes sense. And I'm so fortunate that I've never lost that. I still have that feeling and that wonder and that gratitude and appreciation for animals as beings. Oh, sorry, Moby is pulling the cord on my computer. hope I don't lose you.
No, you're good.
So that's how I approach them, as just another being. I don't own my dogs. I share my life and my home with them. There's my other one peeking out from behind. But that's sort of how I approach it. And when I photograph a dog, I, based on what I've observed when I'm sort of checking out their personality, I try to portray the dog the way they see themselves, which might sound a little kind of out there and crazy. But, I recently had a client, and she had a very small dog, and this dog was, we'll say, exuberant. We'll use that word.
It's like
Cassidy,
you have PC terminology in the world of dog portrait photography. Exuberant.
Cassidy, if you're watching, I'm talking about you. She was a little spitfire. She was running around in circles. She was calling the shots at the session. And a tiny dog, and when I did the photo reveal, her person said, she looks so big. Like, she's a small dog, but she looks so big in these pictures. And I said, that's because that's how she sees herself. She doesn't see herself as a little dog. She sees herself as large and in charge, So I not only try to reflect how the owners see them, but how they see themselves.
That totally makes sense.
And sometimes it might be a little different way, a different perspective than what they're used to seeing. As humans, we look down at our dogs all day. We come in the house and they greet us, and we look down, we reach down and we pet them. So we're seeing them, this way. When I photograph dogs, and this was another question you had asked about, not to go out of order, but
no. Let's actually, angles. It's a great segue. Let's get into it. Yeah, the photographing from the low angles.
I get low. I'm, on the dog's eye level or lower. I'm usually laying on the ground. So I'm filthy by the end of the session. Dog photography is not glamorous. I come home a mess, but I get low. They say if you think you're low enough, get lower. So I'm typically all the way down. And so when you look at the photos of the dog, you are on eye level with them. You are looking right at them. You're seeing the dog how other dogs see them, because when they're interacting with each other, they're all on eye level. So, and that just makes a much more intimate portrait. You get a lot more feeling, a lot of expression. You're really looking into their eyes. So I think that really helps to capture the spirit and the soul of the dog.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. When I think about, I guess it all kind of ties together. You're talking about personality, and then ultimately looking for the soul of that animal and trying to connect with that, how they see themselves. I don't know. I can't help but kind of project still. Like, I think about Jill, who produces the Bokeh Podcast, has this cat that is hilarious. His name is Shadow. And he looks like a mafia boss almost. Like, he's got this, that's kind of the persona that he carries, because he's huge, just massive, his thick neck. And that's but that's also how I see him. Like, I'm projecting these kind of human experiences onto the cat. So, like, where's the line between our projection of who we think the animal is and then who the animal is, I guess, the way that you're describing it? Is there a line there?
There is. Like I said, that person was very surprised to see her dog looking so large, because that's not really how she thinks of her necessarily. But on the other side of the coin, I sometimes ask the owner, like, tell me about your dog. What are they like? And I want to capture that as well. I want to capture how they see their dog. So I'm doing a couple of different things, So if they think, my dog is really silly, then we focus on catching those moments in time where they're just being sort of goofy at the session. Maybe they run and they have the goofy ears flopping and all of that. Some dogs may, and I say see themselves, obviously I'm putting a lot of my own interpretation into it, but
sure.
Some dogs are really athletic. I think there's a picture of a dog on my website that just full of muscles. This dog looks like he goes to the gym every day, so let's show that off, okay. So we show him catching a Frisbee or catching a ball or, running, so that you really kind of get a sense of his athleticism. And, that's something that the owner can identify with as well.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. So we start first with helping the dog feel comfortable. And then 2, establishing a calm environment, not just for the animal, but also their person as well. 3, it's important to understand the personality of the dog, and of course, building on that idea to learn to kind of see the soul of that dog, not seeing them as an animal as much as just another living being on this planet that we're sharing the life experience with, and looking to capture the depth of that being. Number 5, the importance of getting down on their level to capture them as they are versus, like you said, looking down on them all the time. And then number 6, you mentioned the importance of capturing the dog's person with them in these portraits. And that seems, I don't know, maybe kind of like a given, I guess, in some cases. But the question is how to do that effectively, especially if you've got a super energetic animal. And now we're trying to capture this portrait the way that, again, humans tend to think about portraits, just so posed perfectly with the nice background and the lighting and everything. What does that actually look like when you're going to set up those shots for these clients?
So those are actually easier sometimes than just having the dog in the image, right? Because especially if you have a dog that's a little more on the shy side, they're more comfortable sitting there with their person's arm around them. That feels safe and secure to them. So I do a mixture. I do some where it's posed, they're sitting there, they're looking at the camera and that sort of thing, but I keep that to a minimum. Most people are not comfortable and they don't look their best when they're doing a fake pose, like trying to smile at the camera and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's more directed than posed. And I'll have them do natural activities. I will have them, I'll find a path and have them walking on the path together, because that way they're not thinking about the camera. They're just doing their thing and they're interacting. I'll have them maybe sit with each other and I'll ask, the person to hold their dog's head in their hands and, look into their eyes. And so you get that real connection, between the two. There are some dogs that don't want to cooperate with that. And so a little trick for that is the owner will put a treat in their mouth. And then the dog just, looks at them intently. And, so there are ways to sort of fake it if you can't get it with the dog. But there are also people that just really don't want to be in the picture. And I always encourage people, I said, just get in just a couple of pictures. If you don't like it, it's easy to delete them. But when one of my dogs passed a few years ago, the day after he passed, I was frantically going through my phone trying to find pictures of the two of us together. And the only thing I found was 2 blurry selfies. And I'm a photographer. I know better. Like, why did I not take the time to do that? I don't like being in pictures, but I was so sad that I didn't have that. And I don't want anyone else to find themselves in that situation. Yeah. So there are ways that they can be in the photo without really being in the photo, if that makes sense. So there can be a shot where the dog is at the owner's feet. So we get a shot, maybe from the knee down. And that's a really fun shot, showing sort of their perspective and at their owner's feet. There are shots where they put their paw on the person's hand, and that is super sweet. There's silhouette shots. That's my new favorite thing right now. At sunset, you get the beautiful sunset in the background, and then just the darkened image of the person and the dog. So those are really special. And so that way they feel a little bit more comfortable being in it and not as vulnerable or as exposed as they might.
Well, and as you're talking about that, I actually pulled up a post for anybody who's curious. First of all, you want to go to Carol Arscott Photography on Instagram. We'll link to it in the show notes as well. But from looks like 7 weeks ago, January 25th, there's a post representing this a beautiful example actually of the silhouette shot that you're describing, Carol. And it looks like maybe it was shot at sunset. Is that right? Yep. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful shot. So again, we'll link to both your website and Instagram in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Kind of putting you on the spot here, but you mentioned you're doing a little bit of coaching, and I'd love, because we've only scratched the surface here today as far as getting into this topic. I know there's a lot of kind of tips and tricks that we didn't get into. For photographers listening in who are curious about either building this business or business model, something they haven't been doing, or maybe they already have a pet or dog photography business established, but they'd like some help and guidance, how can they go about getting in touch with you to learn more?
Sure. So on my website, there's actually a link that says for photographers, and they can fill out the contact form to get more information about that. So I am going to be offering an in-person workshop next January, actually with my bestie, Val Woodward of For Real Life Photography. She and I are teaming up, and we are going to be doing a fabulous 3-day workshop somewhere in the Southwest. I'm not going to say where yet, okay. But it's going to be a whole lot of fun and over the top. But I also do one-to-one mentoring. That can be either in person or it can be remote. So if you don't live near me, we can still work together. And it can cover anything. It can cover, the technicals of photography. It could be editing. It could be marketing. It could be PR. It could be, fundraising for rescues. I'm happy to share all my knowledge. And then I'm also coming out with a couple of courses in the next month or two to talk about how to do fundraising projects, books to raise money for rescues, as well as some other projects to help you bring clients into your business, right? Because that's one of the biggest problems for photographers of all genres. Where is my next client coming from? Yeah. So there are easy ways to bring customers into your business without having to spend money on advertising. And I think, I know when I was starting, I didn't know where my next customer was coming from, and it was so overwhelming. I kept looking for answers, and it was really hard. So so many people get discouraged early on, and think about giving up their business. And I don't want anyone to give up on their dreams. It's fabulous. I mean, every day feels like the weekend to me. I love what I'm doing so much, and I just want to share it with the world.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I know you didn't ask for me to share any of that information, but really you've added some great practical conversation to the show today. And I know there's a lot more behind all of that. So I wanted to make sure that our listeners had access to that. I appreciate you sharing. Of course, we'll link to all of this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But thanks again, Carol, for doing the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Nathan, thank you. This was amazing.